Every night, millions of men over 60 go to bed and wake up 3, 4, maybe 5 times just to use the bathroom. They call it getting older, they accept it, they stop talking about it. But here is what most of those men do not know. That pattern of interrupted sleep, that constant pressure in the lower abdomen, that feeling like the bladder never fully empties, is not just aging, it is a warning sign. And in many cases, it is being made dramatically worse by 3 specific things men do or fail to do in the hours right before bed. The prostate does not swell overnight without reason. There are triggers. Biological triggers that happen during the evening hours when hormone levels shift, when inflammation quietly builds, when the wrong habits stack on top of each other at exactly the wrong time. And the tragic part is that most men have no idea they are doing it. They go through the same evening routine night after night, and each night the prostate gets a little more irritated, a little more swollen, a little more reactive. So the question is this: what if just 3 changes to what you do before bed could start reversing that process? What if the hours before sleep are actually the most powerful window your body has to reduce prostate inflammation, improve hormonal balance, and let you sleep through the night without waking up to rush to the bathroom? That is exactly what we are going to talk about today. I'm Dr. Natalie Parker, and if you want to keep receiving important content about men's health after 60, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. And I want to come back to that question because the answer matters more than most men realize. The prostate is not a passive organ. It does not just sit there. It responds to your hormones, to your nervous system, to your circulation, to your inflammation levels every single day. And that means every single day you have the ability to either calm it down or fire it up. Tonight, you are going to learn how to calm it down. Let us start with the first thing. And this one surprises almost every man I talk to. The position you sit in during the last 2 hours before bed is directly affecting your prostate. That sounds almost too simple to be true, but the science behind it is clear. When you sit for long periods in a reclined position, slouched on a couch, leaning back in a recliner, lying on your side with your hips compressed, the muscles of your pelvic floor stop activating. They go into a kind of passive shutdown, and when the pelvic floor loses tone, pressure builds in the prostate region. The surrounding tissue stops moving blood efficiently. Fluid accumulates. Inflammation has the exact conditions it needs to do damage. Here is something most men have never thought about. Your pelvic floor is not just a muscle group. It is a dynamic pressure system that directly surrounds the prostate gland. When it is working correctly, it acts like a gentle pump, moving blood and lymphatic fluid through the tissue, keeping inflammation in check, supporting normal glandular function. When it stops working, when it goes slack from hours of passive sitting, that fluid stagnates. The prostate sits in a pool of inflammatory byproducts and has nowhere to drain them. Now here is the practical side of this. The fix is not complicated. In the last 2 hours before bed, you want to be intentional about how you are sitting. Sit upright, feet flat on the floor, hips level, not perched uncomfortably, but actively supported. If you are watching television, put a firm cushion behind your lower back so your spine stays in a neutral position. Every 30 to 40 minutes, stand up. Walk to the kitchen, walk to another room, just stand and shift your weight from foot to foot for 60 seconds. That movement, that simple, gentle movement, reactivates the pelvic floor. It starts the pump moving again. Do you ever notice that your nighttime bathroom urgency is worse on the days when you spend the evening just sitting? That is not a coincidence. That is cause and effect. Some men find it helpful to do 5 minutes of slow walking indoors right before bed. Not exercise, not exertion. Just slow, deliberate walking with attention to how the body feels. This is not about burning calories. This is about keeping the pelvic circulation active long enough to hand the body off to sleep in a better state. The prostate responds to that. The tissue is better perfused, inflammation has less of an opening, and the bladder relaxes with less pressure from a swollen gland pushing against it. This first change alone, the way you sit and move in the evening, is something you can start tonight. And many men notice a difference in the first few nights. Not a miracle. Not a complete elimination of symptoms, but a real measurable reduction in how many times they wake up. Now let us talk about the second thing. And this one involves what you are drinking and eating in those last hours, but probably not in the way you expect. Most men already know they should limit fluids before bed. They do it. They stop drinking water at 8 o'clock and think the problem is solved. But the problem is not just about volume. It is about what those fluids contain and what foods are doing to your hormonal environment while you sleep. Here is what is happening inside the body of a man over 60 during the night. While you sleep, your body produces a hormone called antidiuretic hormone, sometimes called ADH or vasopressin, whose job is to tell the kidneys to slow down urine production so you can sleep uninterrupted. In younger men, this system works efficiently. In men over 60, the production of this hormone naturally declines. That is why older men wake up more often. But here is the critical part. Certain foods and drinks consumed in the evening actively suppress even the reduced amount of ADH your body is still producing. What are those foods? Alcohol is the obvious one, and most men already know to avoid it before bed. But what about black tea? Regular coffee, even decaffeinated coffee, contains compounds that irritate the bladder lining directly, independent of caffeine. What about sugar? High sugar intake in the evening raises insulin, which affects aldosterone, which changes how your kidneys handle sodium and water. What about salty snacks? Sodium causes fluid retention during the day and then a fluid shift at night when you lie down, meaning all that retained fluid suddenly becomes available to be processed by the kidneys just as you are trying to sleep. And then there is the prostate-specific issue. Certain foods directly promote prostatic inflammation. Foods high in arachidonic acid. This includes processed meats, fast food, fried foods eaten in the evening, raise the level of inflammatory prostaglandins that act directly on prostate tissue. This does not just cause swelling. It causes the kind of chronic low-grade inflammation that, over months and years, contributes to significant prostate enlargement. So what does the right evening eating pattern actually look like? The last full meal should be finished at least 3 hours before bed. This is not just about digestion. When the digestive system is still working hard, blood is redirected away from peripheral tissue, including the pelvic region. The prostate gets less circulation exactly when it needs to be calming down for the night. After that final meal, if you need something, go for foods that are actually anti-inflammatory. A small handful of pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are one of the most studied foods for prostate health. They contain beta-sitosterol, a plant compound with documented effects on reducing urinary symptoms in men with an enlarged prostate. They contain zinc, which is concentrated in the prostate gland at higher levels than almost any other tissue in the body, and which plays a direct role in cellular health and inflammation regulation. A small portion, maybe a tablespoon or two, eaten in the early evening, is a habit with genuine biological support. Tomatoes, specifically cooked tomatoes, are another option worth noting. The lycopene in cooked tomatoes, more bioavailable than in raw tomatoes, has been studied in relation to prostate health for decades. A small serving of tomato-based food in the early evening is not going to solve a serious problem overnight, but as a consistent habit over weeks and months, it is the kind of low-cost, high-value change that accumulates. What about fluids specifically? Limiting fluids after 7 or 8 in the evening remains a reasonable practice, but the type of fluid matters even more. Herbal teas like chamomile or rooibos have mild anti-inflammatory properties and no bladder-irritating compounds. Warm water with a small amount of ginger has long been used for prostate comfort, and ginger does have documented anti-inflammatory mechanisms. These are not cures. They are small, evidence-adjacent choices that add up. The men who make these changes and stay consistent for 2 to 3 weeks often describe a meaningful reduction in nighttime urgency, not 0 trips to the bathroom. For many men over 60, that is not a realistic overnight outcome. But going from 4 or 5 wake-ups to 1 or 2 is a change that transforms quality of life, cognitive function, mood, and energy the next day, which brings us to the third thing. And this one is the most overlooked, the most underestimated, and in many ways the most powerful of the 3. Your nervous system state at the moment you fall asleep determines your prostate's inflammatory environment throughout the night. Let that sink in for a moment. The autonomic nervous system has two primary modes: sympathetic, which is fight or flight, high alert, elevated cortisol, and parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, recovery, anti inflammatory. When you fall asleep in a sympathetic state, stressed, mentally activated, heart rate elevated, cortisol still circulating, your body produces an inflammatory environment all night long. Cortisol suppresses immune regulation. Pro-inflammatory cytokines circulate more freely. The prostate, which is highly sensitive to this inflammatory milieu, sits in that environment for 7 or 8 hours. Now think about how most men over 60 end their evenings. They watch the news. They scroll through their phones. They think about tomorrow's appointments, financial concerns, health worries. They lie in bed with a busy mind. Their heart rate is elevated, their jaw is tight, they fall asleep in a sympathetic state, and their body spends the entire night producing the exact hormonal and inflammatory conditions that make prostate problems worse. This is not speculation. Research on sleep quality and prostate inflammation consistently shows a relationship between sleep disruption, elevated nighttime cortisol, and worsening lower urinary tract symptoms in older men. The connection is real, and it is bi-directional. Prostate problems disrupt sleep, and poor sleep quality worsens prostate inflammation. Breaking that cycle requires addressing the nervous system directly. Here is what shifting into a parasympathetic state before bed actually involves. In the 45 to 60 minutes before sleep, reduce all visual stimulation. Blue light from screens suppresses melatonin production, which already declines with age. But the more significant issue is that screen content, news, social media, even entertainment that has tension or conflict, keeps the mind in an activated state. The brain does not easily downshift after stimulation. It needs a transition period. Replace screen time with something low stimulus, reading a physical book, listening to calm music or nature sounds. A short meditation, even 5 minutes of focused breathing, activates the vagus nerve, which is the primary driver of parasympathetic activation. Slow breathing, specifically breathing out for longer than you breathe in, inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6 or 7, directly shifts your nervous system into a calmer state. This is not pseudoscience. Vagal tone and its relationship to inflammation is one of the most well-researched areas in autonomic medicine. Warm water exposure before bed is another tool worth taking seriously. A short warm shower or a 10-minute foot soak in warm water shifts blood flow toward the surface of the skin and away from the core. This drop in core body temperature is one of the most powerful physiological signals for sleep onset, and the warm water itself activates the parasympathetic nervous system through thermoreceptors in the skin. Men who add a warm shower or foot soak to their pre-bed routine often report not just falling asleep faster, but sleeping more deeply. Gentle stretching of the hips before bed is worth adding here. The hip flexors, the piriformis, the inner thigh muscles, these are the structures that, when chronically tight, create compression through the entire pelvic region. 5 minutes of gentle hip opening stretches, nothing intense, just slow, held positions where you breathe into the stretch, releases that chronic compression. The prostate benefits directly. Blood moves more freely. Lymphatic drainage improves. The glandular tissue gets the circulation it needs to manage inflammation overnight. There is something called the prostate's overnight repair window. Between approximately 1 and 4 in the morning, provided the body is in a deep enough sleep state, tissue repair and immune regulation in the prostate reach their peak. Cells remove inflammatory waste products. Hormonal balance is recalibrated. The gland essentially does maintenance, but that repair window only opens fully when the body is in a parasympathetic, deeply restful state. If you are waking up every hour to use the bathroom, if you are sleeping in a cortisol-elevated environment, that window never fully opens. The maintenance never completes, and over months and years, the cumulative effect of that missed repair is a prostate that keeps getting more inflamed, more enlarged, more symptomatic. If you are serious about protecting your prostate and reclaiming your sleep, I want you to know about the medical guide to avoid the mistakes that damage the prostate after 60, available in the pinned comment below the video. This guide goes deeper into everything we have discussed today and gives you a structured, week-by-week approach to implementing these changes in a way that is sustainable and effective. Now let us talk about how all three of these things work together, because individually each one has value, but together they create a compounding effect that is significantly greater than the sum of the parts. Think about what an optimized evening looks like for a man over 60 who wants to support his prostate health. He finishes his last meal by 7 o'clock. The meal does not include processed or fried food. Maybe it includes a side of cooked tomatoes or a handful of pumpkin seeds earlier in the evening. From that point forward, he is mindful about how he is sitting. He gets up from the couch every 30 to 40 minutes and moves briefly. He avoids alcohol, caffeine, and salty snacks. Around 9 o'clock, he begins to wind down. He puts the phone away. He reads or listens to something calm. He does 5 minutes of breathing exercises. He takes a warm shower. He does 5 minutes of gentle hip stretching. He goes to bed with his nervous system in a relaxed state. His pelvic circulation has been active throughout the evening. His prostate has not been sitting in a pool of stagnant fluid. His inflammatory load is lower because he has not eaten things that promote prostaglandin production. His cortisol is low because he spent the last hour actively guiding his nervous system toward rest. And as he sleeps, his body has the conditions it needs to actually do the repair work. Does this mean zero bathroom trips? Not necessarily. Especially in the early weeks, the prostate does not transform in a single night. But over time, and men consistently report this over 2 to 4 weeks of real commitment, the frequency decreases, the urgency decreases, the sense of pressure decreases, sleep becomes deeper, energy the next day improves. And the cumulative effect on prostate inflammation over months of consistent practice is real and meaningful. There are a few additional points worth making because some men have specific situations that change the picture. If you are currently taking any medication for an enlarged prostate, these evening habits are not a replacement for that treatment. They work alongside it. Talk to your doctor about incorporating lifestyle changes. Most physicians will support it. What we are describing here is not alternative medicine. It is basic physiology applied consistently. If you are experiencing significant pain, blood in the urine, or very sudden changes in urinary function, those are symptoms that require prompt medical evaluation. Lifestyle habits are powerful for managing chronic inflammation and gradual progression of symptoms. They are not the right response to acute symptoms that may indicate infection or other conditions requiring treatment. For the majority of men over 60 dealing with the common experience of gradual urinary frequency, nighttime wake-ups, incomplete bladder emptying, and the general loss of prostate comfort that comes with age, these three things represent a genuine intervention. They are free, they require no equipment, they require only consistency, and consistency is where most efforts fall apart. Not because the habits are hard, but because men do not feel the connection clearly enough between what they do at 9 o'clock and how they sleep at 2 in the morning. The delay makes the cause and effect feel invisible. That is why understanding the mechanism matters. When you understand that your evening sitting position is affecting pelvic circulation, you feel the importance of getting up and moving. When you understand that the snack you eat at 9 is affecting your hormonal environment at midnight, you make a different choice. Knowledge changes behavior because it makes the invisible visible. So here is the answer to the question we started with. Can 3 changes to your evening routine actually start reducing prostate inflammation within 7 days? Yes. Not because of magic, not because of any single dramatic intervention, but because the prostate is responsive tissue. It responds to circulation. It responds to inflammation levels. It responds to hormonal environment. And all 3 of those things are directly influenced by what you do in the hours before sleep. 7 days of consistent changes creates a measurable shift in the inflammatory environment your prostate sits in every night. That shift accumulates. And over weeks and months, what was a growing, worsening problem becomes a manageable, improving one. The men who commit to this do not just notice better sleep. They notice better energy, better mood, less anxiety about nighttime symptoms, a sense of agency over their own health that many of them had lost. That agency is real. It is earned through consistent small actions that add up to something significant. If this video gave you something useful, consider sharing it with a man you know who is dealing with these issues. Most men suffer in silence because this is not a comfortable topic, but it should be talked about, because solutions exist, because the body has more capacity for recovery and improvement than most men over 60 have been told to expect. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the content that could make a real difference in your health. New videos go up regularly covering the topics that matter most to men in this stage of life. Prostate health, testosterone, sleep, circulation, energy. Real information explained clearly without the noise. Take care of yourself tonight. Start tonight. Your prostate is listening to everything you do in those last few hours before bed. Tonight, give it something worth hearing.